Please join me in welcoming Jason Collett.
When I was talking to Rita about this conference and the folks that were going to be here, or this meeting, we talked about the heart of leadership. And it was a challenge for me to really dig down, because the heart is something that's harder to train, right? It's not something that you just put on a piece of paper and you check some boxes and you say, okay, now we have heart. 3 stories. The first one is actually finding your path. And so with a lot of leaders and a lot of coaches and a lot of folks that I've worked with over the years, one of the critical things is really finding out what motivates you, what pushes you forward, and digging back into whether it's the psyche or the brain or the soul or wherever that resides, figuring out what moves you forward. So at about the age of 18, I ended up in Prague, Czechoslovakia at the time, now the Czech Republic. And it's a beautiful city, incredible city, great, rich history and culture. Now this is right in the 1990s when the wall had recently come down. And there was a flood of activity from the Western world coming into this place, right? All kinds of activity. And part of the tour that I was on, we had the opportunity to go visit the city. And we also actually stayed with host families. So this all leads to the day that we're leaving. And here's a little girl wearing my sunglasses back in 1992. And we're getting ready to go. We're loading up on the bus. I actually had hair then, which is a great thing. And I start thinking about the experience that I just had. The family that I was just with. The accommodations that were given to me. The sense of leadership, if you will, that the mother was demonstrating to her kids and to the community and to me, and what an amazing event that was. And of course, the last thing I do is hug the mother. And she gives me this great big hug, and I look at her and I ask, why did you do this? No offense, right, when I'm saying this, but you don't have a lot of money, everything for your kids. Why would you bring in me and feed me? I just don't understand. And she cupped her hands around my face and she pulled me in, and in broken English, she said, I'll never be able to afford to send my kids out into the world, so I brought the world to them. And so I'm going to ask us today, how are we doing that? How are we putting purpose and heart into that influence as we're interacting with people? So the second story is about a climb that we did in Africa. It's actually Kilimanjaro. It's the highest summit in Africa. It is still snow and glacier capped, although it does change year to year. And I have to ask, because it's actually becoming a relatively popular mountain. So has anybody in the room actually been to or climbed Kilimanjaro? Yes. Been to it? Climbed it? Been to it? Well, where are my climbers? That's the next piece, right? Beautiful. If you went on safari, right? I mean, it's amazing culture, amazing people at the base of in the surrounding areas in Tanzania. It's incredible. That elephant chased us. Like, we were out on safari and he just got his little eyes fixed on us and decided he did not want us there. And after us he came. That little girl right in the middle picture, great little girl with that teal jacket on. You see her with a red skirt? There was a cinder block about this big, and she had gotten a hold of my binoculars. And what she really found interesting was looking the wrong way through the binoculars, right? Because it was so far away. And so she thought that was hilarious, and again, no communication from a language standpoint, but wonderful interaction non-verbally and big smiles and having fun. And as she stands on this cinder block, she puts the binoculars up backwards and looks down the cinder block, looks at me, looks at the cinder block, looks at me, puts her eyes in and goes, and this huge smile that just bounces off of her face. So there we are, climbing, and not only are the choices that my brother had made before he even got to this mountain starting to catch up with him, but now I'm being forced with choices. Because as we got to the highest level, the last high camp, a decision had to be made, because he wasn't going to make it, right? He wasn't going to make it in the time to get to the summit to get off the summit by 9 a.m. before the storms roll in, because you don't want to be up there in the storm. So the choice was, okay, we're going to leave at midnight. If you want to climb this mountain, you got to leave at 10 p.m., put on your headlamp, start climbing, and we're going to pass you. And we'll see how it goes. So that's the choice that we made. And certainly, he took off. He was not very happy. He was a little bit grumpy. And I've seen my grumpy brother before, and so I just kind of stayed quiet, let him crawl out the tent into the cold weather, and off he went. About 2 hours into our hike, after we left at midnight, we're already passing, right? I can see the light going up the scree fields towards the summit, and then big, huge stars everywhere, because there's no other man-made light. And we're climbing, and we're catching, and we're climbing, and we're catching, and we get to the scree field, and sure enough, man, he is just labor, can't do this. He did not make the summit. The choices that we made at that point in time set the stage that he wasn't going to probably succeed with us. And sometimes in organizations, what we have to recognize is where people's strengths are. We have to recognize what is their path, where are they going, what are they dedicated to, and maybe that path doesn't align with ours. Now, we support them as much as we can, just like we support my brother on the mountain, but at the end of the day, it's their choice on what path they take. So we enjoyed pictures on the summit. We get to hold the sign. It says you are now at the Uruhu Peak. It's 6,000 meters. Great event, great success, but I have to say it felt a little hollow, right? So the choices that we make sometimes do hurt. Sometimes they are hard choices, but yet it's the right choice. And so as I head back down, I'm looking for him and trying to watch, the horizon and trying to watch downstream and see where we're going to meet up again. And sure enough, after about 15, 20 minutes walk, and going down is a lot faster than going up, there he is. And I see him with his trekking pole. Moving along, moving along. He was still making choices, right? He was running out of time, but he was still making choices. And so, as a very cool older brother, I put on my sunglasses so that he couldn't see my face. Hey man, how you doing? He's like, oh, right? I'm like, man, I'm so excited. This is great. And I turned around, arm in arm, and up to the summit we went. So there we got our shot, right? We got to stand there on the summit together, but it was after all these individual choices, right? So my question is, what is that goal? And it's imperative for us as leaders to start defining that goal and figure out what does it mean to achieve that goal and what are the hard choices that we're going to make on the way to ultimately be successful, and how do we define that success? So the third story, the last story, comes to you from the highest summit in South America. It's called Aconcagua. It's about 23,000 feet. It's one of the, if not the, it's one of the top 5 most deadliest mountains on the planet. They call this the Valley of Death. That's inspirational when you're going to climb a mountain, right? The Valley of Death is about 115, 120 degrees on average, and it's a dry wind. So there's not a lot of vegetation, if any. There's not really any animals to speak of, but it's called this alpine desert. The stranger thing is that in this incredible heat, and when you got an 85-pound pack on and you're trekking across the landscape, that there are glacial winds that blow down from the summit that are sub-freezing. Imagine walking 85 pounds, and that's like a small person hanging on your back. You're sweating, you're hungry, you're not real happy, and then a wind blows that literally freezes your sweat to your skin. It's beyond refreshing, right? It is amazing. Incredible experience, the high camp, coming up, climbing the glacier points. sleeping in tents. They call it the roaring 40s and up to the roaring 60s. That's 60 degrees below zero with 85-mile-an-hour winds. And you're sleeping in a tent. And we have to build a wall around the tent. That's about a 5,000-foot drop-off on the back side, and the wind's blowing so hard that as I'm sitting in there laying down, sleeping with my partner, with the equipment, we're in our sleeping bag, the wind's blowing underneath the floor of the tent and picking us up like an airbed. And then we decide it might be a good idea to build a wind barrier on the outside, right? Get that wind blowing over the top. So we're 3 days from the summit. And we see this. We come around the valley and we see the summit for the first time and we see a storm blowing through. And so one of the gentlemen on my team, he freaked out. He flat freaked out, right? There we were, halfway up, and he's like, right? All the stories are coming to life. The scenes and some of the things that we've witnessed are coming to life. The summit is very real and staring us in the face, and he freaks out. He was the fittest and the most well-equipped and the best out of anybody in the team, including me. But mentally, he wasn't there anymore, right? He had shifted dramatically. And so One Step talks about how in that moment, and this is key for good leaders, is recognizing that his emotional meltdown isn't necessarily the only thing that should be happening at that time from the standpoint of, okay, what's next? Because the only choice is he cannot stand where he's at. He has to take a step. It's either taking a step back or it's taking a step forward. And so when we started this conversation and trying to calm him down, what was he focused on? He was focused on the summit. He was focused on that little teeny tiny peak up there in the sky. And it was overwhelming. And so we got to have the conversation of, it's not about, you can't get to the summit tomorrow. It's going to take us a while. The only choice that you have before you is one more step. How do you progress towards your goal in your organization? With one more step. Because then the world's going to be a different place, and then we're going to have to make another decision. One more step. The last story, and this one's short, this is actually Everest. The expeditions that were there at the time, it was the biggest tragedy. What I didn't know when this picture was being taken from Primari is that this storm was going to leave a lot of people in its wake. And so when I ask the question to find the true goal, anytime we get together, whether it's a leadership, whether it's a training, whether it's mountaineering, or anything in between, I always ask the question, what's the goal? What's the true goal? The funny thing about mountaineering, and because of my stories, you're already preempted for the proper answer on this, but most of the time when people are wanting to climb a mountain, they're excited. They're getting together. We're having dinner. They got their passports. They've been working out for a year, right? They're ready to go. And what do they want to do? They want to hit the summit. That's what it's all about. I want to I want to take that picture. I want to pull out my flag. I want to go back and tell everybody about this experience. I want to summit, 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 summit. But there's only one true goal in mountaineering. Return home safely. That's it. If we don't all agree that there's only one true goal, return home safely, there are much different decisions made than if our goal was get to the summit. Does that make sense? It's so easy to get caught up. It's so easy in business. It's so easy in charitable groups and not-for-profit groups, right? We're always focused on $1 million by XYZ. By 2020, we're going to be a $10 billion company. And then we go and relay that message. And that message is the summit. It's what's shiny. It's what's sparkly. It's what's attractive. It looks good to our stakeholders. It looks good to our investors. It's what we're focused on. And if we hit it, then we're going to go on from there. But my question is, with your organization, what's your real goal? What's the equivalent of your return home safely? If you want to engage and enliven and tie your people up so that they are so energetic that they're going to charge for that goal, then the heart of leadership is where it's at.